Dear students, welcome to the course of Architecture and Town Planning. I am your teacher Ravinder Kumar Khiani, Assistant Professor, Department of Architecture and Planning, Energy University of Engineering and Technology, Karachi, Sindh, Pakistan. Today the topic of our discussion is street traffic and design. So let's begin with our lecture. Introduction. If one reads the topic street traffic and design, the initial thought that comes to mind is that it is the theme that spells out about the design of traffic in a street or design streets to accommodate traffic. Whereas, if the topic is carefully read again, it can be further interpreted as it is about understanding the definition, types, purpose, functions, and activities of a street within a built environment, and designing the street with pedestrian and vehicular traffic in it. In the following, this second thought and interpretation is further explained in detail. It includes definition of a street, role of a street in built environment, circulation within streets, vehicular traffic in the streets, parking of vehicles in the streets, pedestrian traffic, and vehicular amenities in the streets, interaction in streets, identity of streets, streets as a distinct from other spaces, and finally the nomenclature of the streets. In this way, it is believed that the student would have a clear perspective about the street traffic and design and town planning. So let's begin with the street traffic and design. Definition of a street. A street is a public thoroughfare in built environment. It is a public parcel of land adjoining buildings in an urban context on which people may freely assemble, interact, and move about. A street can be as simple as level patch of dirt, but is more often paved with a hard, durable surface such as concrete, cobblestone, or brick. Portion may also be smooth with asphalt, embedded with rails, or otherwise prepared to accommodate non-pedestrian traffic. Originally, the word street simply meant a paved road. The word street is still sometimes used colloquially as a synonym to road, but city residents and urban planners draw a crucial modern distinction. A road's main function is transportation, with the street facilitates the public interaction. Examples of the street include the pedestrian streets, the alleys, the city center streets, too crowded for road vehicles to pass. Conversely, highways and motorways are types of road, but few would refer to them as streets. So what is the role of streets in built environment? Let's discuss. Role of street in the built environment. The street is a public easement, one of the few shared between all sorts of people. As a component of the built environment as ancient as human habitation, the street sustains a range of activities vital to civilization. Its roles are as numerous as diverse and its ever-changing cast of characters. Streets can be loosely categorized as main streets and side streets. Main streets are usually broad with a relatively high level of activity, and commerce and public interaction are more visible on main streets, and vehicles may use them for longer distance travel. Side streets are quieter, often residential in use and character, and may be used for vehicular parking. How the circulation takes place within the streets. Circulation or pedestrian and vehicular movement is perhaps a street's most visible and certainly the most important use. The unrestricted movement of people and goods within a city is essential to its commerce and vitality, and streets provide the physical space for this activity. In the interest of order and efficiency, an effort may be made to segregate different types of traffic within the streets. This is usually done by carving a road through the middle of the motorist, reserving sidewalks on either side for pedestrians. Other arrangement allows for streetcars, trolleys, and even wastewater and rainfall runoff ditches. In the mid-20th century, as automobile threatened to overwhelm city streets with pollution and ghastly accidents, many urban theorists come to see this segregation as not only helpful but very necessary in order to maintain mobility within the city of vehicular and pedestrians. To this end, proposals were advanced to build vertical streets, where road vehicles, pedestrians, and trains would occupy their own levels. Such an arrangement, as it was said, would allow for even denser development in the future. These plans were never implemented comprehensively, a fact which today's urban theorists regard as a fortunate for vitality and the diversity of the cities and the streets and its neighborhoods. Rather, vertical segregation is applied to a piecemeal basis, as in sewers, utility poles, depressed highways, elevated railways, common utility ducts, the extensive complex of underground malls, surrounding Tokyo Station and the Ochimachi subway station, the elevated pedestrian skyway networks of Minneapolis and Calgary, the underground cities of Atlanta and Montreal, and the multi-level streets in Chicago. If you wanted to see these, I have given you this reference of YouTube. You can see these streets of different kinds. The transportation is often misunderstood to be the defining characteristics or even the sole purpose of a street. It is not. This has not been the case since the word street came to be limited to urban situations. And even in the automobile age, it is still demonstrably false. A street may be temporarily blocked to all through traffic in order to secure the space for other uses, such as street fair, a flea market, children at play, filming a movie, and construction works. So streets have a variety of functions and activities that takes place within the street. What about vehicular traffic in the streets? The operator of a motor vehicle may regard a street as a thoroughfare for vehicular travel or parking. The driver perceives a street as one way or two way. One way streets have signs reading one way and an arrow showing the direction of the allowed travel. The two-way streets are wide enough for at least two lanes of traffic. Which lane is for which direction of the traffic depends upon the country the street is located in. One broader two-way streets, there is a center line marked and middle of the street separating lanes. Occasionally, there may be a median strip separating lanes of opposing traffic. If there is more than one lane going in one direction on a main street, these lanes may be separated by the intermittent lane lines marked on the street pavement. The side streets do not have center lines or lane lines. So you see that there are various, you can say, types of streets and vehicular traffic in them. Now let's look at the street traffic and design. There are various, you can say, street users or variety of street users. We must know who use the street before the design of the street. There are pedestrians, there are cyclists, there are transit riders, there are motorists, there are freight operators and service providers, and there are people doing business in the streets. So let's talk about these different people and activities within the streets. First of all, let's talk about the variety of street users. In most cities, streets constitute the largest percentage of public property, and this space must be equitably distributed between the needs of the many different users of urban streets. The design must accommodate people walking, cycling, taking transit, enjoying public spaces, providing city services, doing business, or driving. So this chapter or this you can say lecture identify the design elements and strategies to support safe and inviting spaces for the variety of people using the urban streets. First of all, let's talk about the pedestrians. The pedestrians include people of all abilities and ages, sitting, walking, pausing, and resting within the urban streets. Designing for pedestrians means making streets accessible to the most vulnerable users. Design spaces, safe spaces with continuous, unobstructed sidewalks. Include visual variety, engage building frontage, design for human scale, and incorporate protection from extreme weather to ensure the enjoyable street experience. As there are variety of pedestrians, some can walk and some cannot walk. So the street must have a smooth surfaces. Then there must be cyclists. Cyclists include people on bicycles, cycle rickshaws, and cargo bikes. Facilities should be provided for the safe, direct, intuitive, clearly delineated, and part of a cohesive, connected network to encourage use by the people of all ages and confidence levels. The cycle tracks that create an effective division from traffic are well coordinated with signal timing and are incorporated in the intersection design form the basis of an accessible and connected cycle network. So street must have space for cyclists. Then there are transit riders. The transit riders are people who are using collective transport such as rail, bus, or small collective vehicles. This sustainable mode of transportation dramatically increases the overall capacity and efficiency of the street. The dedicated space for transit supports convenient, reliable, and predictable services for riders. Accessible boarding areas promote safe and equitable use. The space dedicated to a transit network should be aligned with demand, meeting services needs without sacrificing streetscape quality or the beauty of the street. Then there are motorists which also use the streets. The motorists are people driving personal motor vehicles for on-demand point-to-point transportation. This includes drivers of private cars for hire vehicles and motorized two and three wheelers. Streets and intersections must be designed to facilitate safe movement and management of interactions between the motor vehicles, pedestrians, and the cyclists. So these are very important elements of street traffic and design. Then there are freight operators and service providers which also use the streets. The freight operators and service providers are the people driving vehicles that move goods or conduct critical city services. These users benefit from dedicated curb access and allocation of space for easy loading and unloading as well as dedicated routes and hours of operation. The emergency responders and cleaning vehicles need adequate space to operate within the streets which must be accommodated while ensuring the safety of all the other street users. Then there are people in the state who are doing business in the state. They must also be accommodated. People doing business include the vendors, the street stall operators, and owners of the or the renters of the commercial street fronts or store fronts. These users provide important services that support vibrant, active, and engaging street environment. The adequate space should be allocated to these users. Provide regular cleaning, maintenance, schedules, power and water to support the commercial activity and improve local quality of life. Because these commercial activities are very important for the sustenance of the community within living within neighborhoods. Now, furthermore, there are also some green street principles. Let's discuss about green street principles. The first thing is to protect and restore the natural resources within the streets. Then to promote health and equity and human habitat. Then we should design for the safety and the mobility. So these are the green street principles. There are also three more. Then there is design for the life cycle. When we design the street, we should design for the whole life cycle. And design for the resilience or sustenance to the climate change and other, you can say, natural and man-made disaster. And there must be optimization for the performance of the streets. So these are the six basic green street design principles. Now let's further go and look at the different street traffic and design. Now this is like a neighborhood street that you are looking at. Then this is the residential street on the top. Then there is a street with landscape. Then there's street with socializing space. So a street must have all these different kinds of physical, social, and economic activities, spaces for the good, healthy environment and good quality of environment within the street. Then there must be street must have if the vehicles are allowed in the street must have a safety island for pedestrians. So as pedestrian can be given a priority in the movement within the streets. Then there are streets with transport for pedestrian and cycle lane, because you see nowadays all over the world cyclists are very much encouraged, because it is more sustainable use of vehicles and non-polluting. So that's why in universally or in all the major good countries where you have the good environment, physical environment, they design space for cyclists and pedestrians separate, and for the social interaction separate, and then for vehicles separate. So that is the way of designing the streets and street traffic. Then you can see that there is a street traffic with circulation and place for social interaction. Because people do not always do social interaction in restaurants or in their houses or in commercial buildings or in malls. There must be some open spaces available for them for doing business, for doing different kind of activities, because it develops street characteristics. Then there's a concept of a complete street. What is complete street? The complete streets are those streets which are for everyone. The street which can be used by kids, for young people, for old people, for middle-aged people, and for the people with imparities, who do not have a, you can say, a proper way of looking things, and people who cannot walk, or people who are disabled in any kind. So designing for, there should be universal design for the disabled people and for people of all ages. Then these complete streets are designed and operated to enable safe access for all the users, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. So this is also important. We must make or design the inclusive streets. Then streets are also termed as ecosystem, because we can make the green streets, and there occurs variety of, you can say, animals and the birds and the plants, and we can make a very good healthy quality environment within the streets. So in the developed world, you can see they make the green stormwater infrastructure. So when the rain occurs, then rainwater should drain automatically. Then you can see how the street transformation is taking place. This is the existing condition of a street, and it is designed and it is transformed like this. That is the interim design. When people use it, they give feedback about the street's activities and its use and its movement and circulation and social interaction. And based on that, the improved design is developed. And you can see the street develop like this. So we should have, as we know, we have in our cities, the streets are very not in good condition. So we must take responsibility of at least the state in which we are living, and we try to improve their conditions by contributing towards the improvement and betterment of the streets. Now there are different types of streets. There is transit streets. Transit streets are those streets which have a bus stop, or you can say tramway stop, or where vehicles and pedestrians go together, and there should be a harmonious circulation pattern. These are the transit streets. You can see how it is divided into different lanes, and there is a pedestrian lane, there is a vehicular lane, there is a transit lane, and then there is a social interaction lane. So these are the important things in transit streets. Here you can see the transit streets. Only for bus, there is also the exclusive right of way given to the bus, because it moves lot of people. There is a country in the South America, for example, Bogota. They have this system that they said, okay, if the streets should have the equal rights for the pedestrian as well as vehicle. So what they did, they have divided the street in two, you can say, portions. One portion is for 50% is for vehicular movement and 50% for pedestrian movement. And whole cities develop like this. You can see such kind of examples all over the world. How the people are given share in the street space, and especially the common people who are mostly poor and can walk a lot, and or they move on the cycles. Then designing the urban boulevards. how urban boulevards are designed. If you want to design the urban boulevard, there should be some mature trees, there should be pedestrian signals, there should be transit stops and stations. And this can be designed like this, and there should be bio-retention facilities so as the overall environment can be better. And there should be bike facilities for the poor people or for people who are doing riding the bikes or cycles. So this will look like this, and this will improve the overall quality. And this is how we design the streets and traffic. Then there are ultra urban green streets. How can we make ultra urban green streets? In order to make them, first of all, tree planting is very important. Then there should be grass planting also, and there should be transit bulbs or boarding islands for the transit vehicles. And this will look like this. And in this way, the ultra urban green street can be created. Then there is urban green transit way. For urban green transit way, we developed the high capacity transit, a green refuge island, the slip lane, and race cycle tracks that are added, and middle block signalized crossing should be made. And this way, there will be urban green transit way. The other is neighborhood's main streets, because it's also important that when the vehicles are also entering the neighborhood, so that should be designed properly. For designing a neighborhood main streets, we should have a green expressions in the street, and we should have a bioretention facilities. We should have street trees. We should have landscaping for social interaction, and this will make the neighborhood main street. Then there are local residential streets, which are leading to different houses. For design of local residential street, it's important that there should be a planting strip, there should be bike boulevard, there should be a mid-block curb, and there should be permeable pavement. And this way, the design of local residential street should be developed. You see that there is a proper movement of the people with disabilities, or people who on the wheelchair can also move freely in this kind of local residential streets. Then there are commercial shared streets. In order to make a commercial shared street, we make a valley gutters or trench drains, and then there should be permeable pavement, there should be street furniture, and there should be pavement patterns and signage. And in this way, a beautiful commercial shared street can be developed, where people can eat on the road and they can easily, we can have such kind of road. We have these on the major main roads of the Karachi, if you look at the city of Karachi. Now, furthermore, there are residential shared streets. For that, there must be textured or permeable pavements. There should be trench drains or collect runoff. There should be grade the street, and they should gateway treatments. And in this way, a beautiful residential shared street can be designed. Furthermore, there are green alley streets. What are green alley streets? For green alley streets, there should be a green alley in the center of the road, and there should be bioretention facilities. There should be interaction between the green alleys and sidewalks. And in this way, proper green alley streets are developed. Then there are large industrial streets. The industrial zone, the street design has different, you can say, perspective. For large industrial streets, we must have green expressions. We should shorten the crossing distances. We should adding the bikeways and parking lane and bikeway. And in this way, we can design the large industrial streets. Furthermore, if we go ahead, there are stormwater greenway streets. For stormwater greenway street, first of all, they should to be restored the natural drainage. There should be a planters and pervious surfaces, and there should be raised crossings, and there should be pervious pavement on the bikeways, and there should be tree plantation. And in this way, we can make a beautiful stormwater greenway street. For in our city, you find there are so many nadis and nalas, and people are living along it. But these streets should be properly designed and developed, such like this example. Furthermore, we must reclaim the multi-leg intersections, because these are very important places which should not only be used for the parking, but you should be used for the social interaction or for the social, you can say, needs of the people, for fulfilling the social needs of the people. For that matter, we should reduce the conflict points, and we should recapture the plaza space or public space for the social interaction, and we should treat well or connected tree trenches should be developed. And you see, in this way, a beautiful, a vehicular space with only use of vehicles, now it is a beautiful place for the people's social interaction. This kind of design is also important for making street traffic and design. Conclusion. Now, streets are basically public space. You must understand and realize that. They should be conceived, analyzed, evaluated, and designed as a public spaces with human scale design and amenities. Cities also are the recognizing that streets are one of their greatest assets. The tremendous amount of land is covered by the streets in our cities. And so streets should be judged by how much they can attract the foot traffic and vibrant city life as much as their ability to move vehicles through the quickly. As an engineer, we always think most about the vehicles, but as an architect, and as an urban designer, a town planner, we must think more about the people's movement and social interaction. Then great streets are great for business. Streets are an economic asset as much as they are a functional space for mobility. So well-designed streets are generating higher revenues for business and homeowners. Well-designed streets increases the business sales and decreases in commercial corridor vacancies after protected pedestrian, bicycle, and bus infrastructure installed. Usually, in our context, what happens is we commercialize the streets a lot, and we do not give proper care to the pedestrians and the vehicular movement in it. This will be properly designed and developed. Then streets can be changed. The transportation engineers and planners have the ability to work flexibly within the right of way of the streets, moving curves, changing alignments, redirecting traffic where necessary. Then we should design for the safety. It is one of the major street traffic and design principles. Within the decades of from 2001 to 2018, more than 4,800 people died while walking on the street in Karachi. And that number is completely unacceptable and we can do much better. So those injuries and deaths on the streets in Karachi can be avoided, and we need to do a better job for designing our streets for safety. So all users can interact and cross paths safely in the streets of the Karachi. Then streets are the ecosystem. This is also another important concept to understand. We can't just treat them as asphalt or concrete that's covering the ground. No, we need to incorporate them into the ecosystem of the city. And that means the green infrastructure and stormwater management, trees that provide shade, and we should have get the climate benefit from providing the landscape in the city. So this is also an important aspect of street traffic and design. I hope you have understood very well what is street traffic and design. Let's go ahead. Finally, let's look at a couple of videos about the street traffic and design case studies abroad. This is the complete street design guideline project, Toronto.
Complete streets is a word that kind of emerged to talk about really planning streets for all users and uses.
It's about balancing all the needs of where people live, where they work, where they commute, how they enjoy the public spaces along streets. It's about blending all those things in, and it's about thinking about those things when you plan, design, and engineer a street.
It is not one size fits all. We need to tailor make the solutions to fit the local conditions, the site constraints.
And streets really are intended to be public and social spaces, as well as their role to move vehicles, pedestrians, transit, and as places for utilities.
When we design our streets for people, it's possible to choose how you're going to move around the city, because all of the infrastructure options that make walking or cycling or taking transit or driving safe options, all of the infrastructure exists to make that possible.
We're looking at doing things like improving accessibility for persons with disabilities, making better ramps at curb locations, and also providing detection out there.
Better growing environment for trees is really important, and that's what we would really like to see. It's great to see that trees and vegetation is being considered on equal footing with the other infrastructure.
Better water quality, better management of stormwater, improves air quality, improves vegetation, life of trees, the aesthetics, all of those things we can accomplish by designing things properly.
People want to enjoy their streets. It's just not a place to commute through. It's a place to shop, to live, to enjoy. And complete streets is really critical in that regard.
Toronto already has some great streets, and I think what we're looking to do is figure out how we replicate the things that we do well here even better. The goal here is we want to provide useful guidance, both internally for our design teams and also externally for private partners who are also redeveloping.
It's also an efficiency thing in terms of construction. We don't want to keep on tearing up our streets. So when we plan a complete street, we think about the underground utilities, the sidewalk, the trees, how it drains, bike parking, bike lanes, all those things make a complete street.
So what we're doing here today and what we're launching here today is a collaborative process between transportation services and city planning to create our complete streets framework and design guidelines for the city of Toronto.
We understand the issues within the public rights-of-way in Toronto. We meaningfully engage both with staff, with the broader public, and in smaller workshops.
We realize that we are dealing with a multidisciplinary issue, a multidimensional opportunity, I would say.
Complete streets or street design is more than a little bit about health. People are much more likely to be out and physically active if they feel that it is safe.
This city is intended to be a city where people who do not have a car are not at a disadvantage. So the city streets must be used to move people, not just vehicles.
We understand Toronto's streets, not just downtown, but in all parts of the city.
Creating complete walkable communities where we have meaningful work and an opportunity for everyone to thrive is a critical center point to our official plan.
Effective, meaningful, and implementable complete streets design guidelines are more important than anything else, a reflection of your values.
The way to be successful is collaboration. There's lots of different constituents, lots of different priorities. The consultant said this is about values. Everybody has a lot of different ideas about what is important in this. So starting to build that consensus and engage people.
I think it's really important to incorporate and engage children and families in street design.
I work with transportation to develop a snowboard plan for that section. Well, that's what has to be looked at also. Yeah. So there's some successes, but there's obviously a lot of challenges as well.
Sure. It's a matter of having that mobility built right into it because Toronto is changing.
So you have seen that how internationally people think about designing their streets. Let's look at another case study. Concerning street traffic and design case study, this is a case study of a superblock project of Barcelona.
If you imagine a typical American city street and you take away the space that's dedicated to cars, you aren't left with very much. There's some narrow walkways on the side and some bridges in between them, but not much else. Cars dominate cities. Spend some time walking around most cities and you'll find yourself pushed to narrow sidewalks, waiting for crosswalk lights. You'll find cyclists navigating really narrow strips of space.
Americans are used to cars the way that fish are used to water. And that's so ubiquitous in the US that I think most people, it just never occurs to them that it could be otherwise.
But what if there were a way to change that, to give space back to pedestrians and bicyclists, and to make cities more friendly to life outside of a car? It turns out Barcelona might have a solution. In 2014, the city was faced with serious air pollution problems. Barcelona and its 35 surrounding municipalities consistently failed to meet the EU's air quality targets, and studies were showing that air pollution in the region was causing 3,500 premature deaths every year. Traffic in the city also causes severe noise pollution. So the city developed an extensive urban mobility plan with the hope of reducing traffic by 21%. The coolest part of the plan were these things. They call them superilles. Superillas?
Sí, superilles.
That translates to superblocks. It's this urban design concept intended to minimize the presence of cars in city centers. The word superblock has been used before to describe huge city blocks without any passageways for cars, but that's not what's happening here. So here's how Barcelona's plan works. You take 9 square city blocks and you close off the inside to through traffic, so buses and big freight trucks, or any vehicles that are trying to get from one part of town to the next, have to drive around the perimeter. Inside the superblock, the speed limit is kept to 10 kilometers per hour. That translates to just over 6 miles per hour. And curbside parking is replaced by underground parking. And that means you wind up with street space for markets and outdoor games and events.
Within this 9 square block perimeter, you're going to have kind of a pleasant streetscape where people can walk around and mingle and do things without this kind of constant fear of cars around.
The concept is going to be tested out in 5 neighborhoods, but the city has identified 120 possible intersections throughout the region where it could be implemented. So how do we know what the results of this kind of plan would look like? Well, northwest of Barcelona is a city called Vitoria-Gasteiz, which has implemented superblock designs since 2008. In the main superblock at the city center, pedestrian space increased from 45% of the total surface area to 74%. And with so much less traffic, noise levels dropped from 66.5 decibels to 61 decibels. Most impressive of all, there was a 42% reduction in nitrogen oxide emissions and a 38% reduction in particle pollution in the area. And on top of that, business is up.
What you consistently see when people change their streetscapes to prioritize human beings over cars is you don't see any decline in economic activity. You see the opposite. You get more people walking and cycling around more slowly, stopping more often, patronizing businesses more, and that kind of sort of that center of social activity will tend to build on itself.
So here's the question. Could something like this work in an American city?
Barcelona has some unique advantages getting started on this plan in that a lot of it was built before cars and a lot of it was built on a simple grid.
The district of Eixample, which is where the superblock plan is based, was designed in 1859 in this repetitive grid structure by this guy, Ildefons Cerdà. He basically invented the word for and the study of urbanization when he laid out this grid plan for Barcelona that evenly distributed resources like schools and hospitals. But superblock designers insist that cities don't need a simple grid structure to implement this kind of plan. It can work anywhere. Now, cities in the US have attempted some car minimizing projects like this. The problem is they're usually done in wealthier areas with lots of existing businesses. Zoning policies often require separation of residential areas and commercial areas, but an ideal walkable area would be a mix of the two. On top of that, zoning minimums on parking availability encourage the presence of cars and parking lots, and minimums on street width make for really wide, unwalkable streets. And because of that, walkable districts are basically isolated luxury items in the US. What makes the Barcelona plan different is that they aren't setting aside one fancy neighborhood or town square to make pedestrian friendly. Instead, by proposing superblocks throughout the entire city, they've declared car-free spaces a right for everybody, no matter what part of town they're in.
Maybe this might be overly optimistic, but I think it's sunk in the US that the model whereby every city resident comes with a car and drives a car everywhere is just inherently limited. It limits the growth of your city. It limits the health of your city and the growth of your city. So one way or another, we have to find ways of having a lot of people live close to one another without all of them having cars. You're being able to get around and work and play and live and have enjoyable lives.
So you have seen that how internationally street traffic and design is taken into consideration and how pedestrians are encouraged and vehicles are discouraged in the cities, and that is the basis of the street traffic and design. Thank you very much. And this is the time that I should give you the references for this lecture which I have used and prepared this lecture. Thanks for watching, and for lecture notes, I always remind you to visit my blog www.townplanninglectures.blogspot.com. Furthermore, the class is over now. You can go and entertain yourself or do whatever you do, but do not disturb or do not affect anyone with your actions. Wish you good luck and goodbye, and hope to see you in the next lecture.